Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1: The Quiet Lane. The fog had crept low over London that evening, clinging to the damp stones and curling in ghostly tendrils about the lamplight. It was the sort of mist that distorted distance and muffled sound, making every footfall echo strangely, as though the city itself were breathing alongside you. Captain Hastings pulled his coat tighter about his shoulders, giving a small shiver as the damp air penetrated his collar. "It is beastly cold, Poirot," he muttered. "I cannot fathom why you insisted upon walking rather than summoning a cab. We could have been at the hotel in half the time." Beside him, Hercule Poirot stepped with deliberate care, his patent leather shoes clicking sharply upon the uneven pavement. His immaculate moustache, curled to perfection, was undisturbed by the night's moisture, and his cane tapped gently at each step. He did not seem at all troubled by the weather. "Mon ami," he said softly, his accent rolling with a peculiar musicality, "to walk after a fine dinner is to aid digestion. The body, it must have order. You eat, you sit, it is no good. You walk, you allow the little grey cells to perform their gymnastics in harmony with the stomach. And besides," he gestured lightly at the mist, his gloved hand making a neat little arc, "London in the fog is not without its charm." "Charm?" Hastings exclaimed. "It is positively sinister. I should not be surprised if some cutthroat leapt from the shadows." Poirot chuckled, a low, indulgent sound. "Always the imagination of the soldier. But sometimes, mon cher, it is as you say. Sometimes the darkness hides the evil very close indeed." They had turned into a narrow passageway, an alley so tight that the tall buildings on either side leaned inward, their upper stories blotting out the weak stars above. The cobblestones were slick with recent rain, and a thin trickle of water ran along the gutter, whispering as it went. The smell was of soot, damp paper, and something faintly metallic. Hastings wrinkled his nose. "I say, this is a dashed unpleasant shortcut," he grumbled. "Couldn't we have gone round by the main road?" Poirot raised a finger. "Listen, Hastings. Do you hear it?" Hastings strained, and at first thought his companion was teasing him with the silence. Then he noticed what Poirot had meant. The city's distant murmur seemed cut off here. No rumble of carts, no cries of street vendors, no laughter from taverns. Only the drip of water and their own footsteps. The hush was uncanny. Poirot slowed, his eyes narrowing. His cane tapped once, then halted. He inclined his head slightly, like a bird listening. "What is it?" Hastings asked, suddenly uneasy. Poirot stepped forward 2 paces, then bent swiftly, his silhouette neat and compact against the mist. "Ah," he breathed. "So there is something here." Hastings joined him, and stopped dead. Against the blackened wall of the alley, crumpled as though he had been discarded by unseen hands, lay the body of a man. His coat was rumpled, one sleeve torn near the cuff. A bowler hat had rolled to rest a little way off, its brim glistening with damp. The man's head was turned at an awkward angle, and beneath him a thin pool of blood spread slowly, dark and sticky upon the stones. "Good Lord!" Hastings exclaimed. "He's been murdered." Poirot lifted one hand in a gentle admonition. "Do not move too quickly, Hastings. The scene, it must remain untouched." He knelt with great care, balancing upon his polished shoes so as not to soil his trousers. His eyes, sharp and precise, roved over the figure, not in haste but in minute consideration of each detail. Hastings, horrified yet compelled, bent nearer. The man's face was pale, the mouth slightly open as though frozen in surprise. His hair was dark and neatly cut, though now matted with damp. His hand, half curled against his chest, bore faint ink stains along the fingers. Poirot touched nothing. Instead, he leaned close enough to observe without disturbing. His lips pressed together thoughtfully, moustache twitching like the whiskers of a cat. "He is not a man of labor," Poirot murmured. "See, the hands are smooth, not calloused. Yet they are ink-stained. He writes, perhaps, yes, writes much, or handles papers. A man of learning, or of business." Hastings swallowed. "You can tell all that merely by his hands." "Mais oui. Always one must observe the small details. They are the true witnesses, who never lie." Poirot's gaze moved to the shoes. One was scuffed at the toe, the leather cracked slightly, though otherwise polished. Poirot leaned closer. "And this, observe, Hastings. The scuff mark is fresh." He struck against something hard, perhaps in haste. Hastings, determined not to be left behind, craned closer. "I see. But surely, Poirot, the wound tells the tale. He has been stabbed, or struck, and robbed." "Robbed?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No, no. Look carefully." The dead man's coat lay partly open. In the inner pocket, visible even without reaching in, was a silver pen, engraved delicately. A wallet protruded from another pocket, untouched. Poirot pointed. "A thief would not leave these, Hastings. No, the motive here, it is not the theft of money. It is something more grave." Hastings looked around nervously. The mist pressed close, thickening as though eager to hide the crime. Then what in heaven's name was it? Who would lure a man here, only to... He broke off, shuddering. Poirot rose to his feet with feline grace, dusting the knees of his trousers. His expression was grave, yet there was a light in his eyes that Hastings had learned to recognize, the light of his little grey cells beginning their silent dance. "The place is chosen with cunning," Poirot said softly. "So narrow, so dark, so empty of witnesses. But even in such a place, the truth leaves its signature. Already, Hastings, I see more than the murderer would wish." From the shadows at the far end of the alley came the sudden clip of hurried footsteps. Hastings spun round. "Did you hear that? Someone's running away." Poirot raised a hand. "Let them go. They will not run far. Already they have left behind the most damning evidence of all." Hastings stared, baffled. "What evidence?" Poirot smiled faintly, smoothing his moustache. "Ah, that, my dear Hastings, is for later. For now, we must summon the police. This poor gentleman will speak no more, but he has told me already a very great deal." The mist swirled about them, and the distant footsteps faded into silence. The alley lay heavy with secrets, the body motionless at its center, and Hastings felt an icy chill creep down his spine. Chapter 2: The Man with No Name. The alley soon bustled with new life, though of the grimmest kind. A constable, lantern in hand, arrived first, his boot splashing in the shallow gutter as he blew his whistle for reinforcement. 2 more policemen followed, their oilskins gleaming wetly in the lamplight. They formed a ring about the body, sternly waving away a cluster of curious onlookers who had gathered at the mouth of the passage like moths drawn to flame. "Move along there, move along," barked the constable. "Nothing to see here." Nothing to see, except, of course, everything to see, thought Hastings grimly. Poirot, ever immaculate, stood a little apart, his head tilted at the exact angle of a man considering a puzzle piece that had yet to fall into place. He looked for all the world as though he were about to attend a matinee performance at the theatre rather than a murder scene. His patent shoes gleamed, untouched by the grime about him, as if even the London fog deferred to his fastidiousness. "Good evening, Poirot," came a familiar gruff voice. Inspector Japp emerged from the mist, tugging his coat collar high against the chill. His face was sharp, his eyes alert, though his manner betrayed no surprise at finding the Belgian detective already present. "I might have known. Where there's a corpse in the shadows, there you are." Poirot inclined his head, moustache quivering with a polite smile. "Bonsoir, Inspector. You see how fate guides the little steps of Hercule Poirot? I walk, I digest my dinner, and behold, I stumble upon murder. It is most inconvenient." "Inconvenient for some, downright useful for me," Japp replied dryly. "Right, lads, let's see what we've got." The constables bent to examine the body with rough practicality, but Poirot, raising a gloved hand, interjected gently. "I beg you, Miss Amos, a little restraint. Already the scene has spoken volumes, if only one knows how to listen. Do not allow the clamour of boots and careless hands to silence it." Japp grunted but gave a short nod. "All right, men. Step back a bit. Let's have Poirot's poetry before we get to police business." Hastings bristled. "It's hardly poetry, Japp. Poirot has an eye for detail you do well to." Poirot silenced him with a delicate gesture, bending once more beside the corpse. His eyes travelled from the ink-stained fingers to the rumpled coat, to the faint trace of cologne that clung stubbornly even against the alley's sour odours. "You see, Inspector? This is not a man of the rough life. His hands tell us he worked with pen and paper, not tools. The coat is of good quality, though worn. The cologne, very fine, and not cheaply bought. And yet, curiously, he has been left with his possessions intact. It was not theft that claimed him." Japp crouched down with a grunt. "HMPH looks like he took a blow to the head. Could be he fell, though." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Fell? Into the arms of death so conveniently, at precisely such a place? Non, mon ami. This is not accident. It is intention." Japp sighed. "And yet, there's nothing to name him. No wallet, no papers, no card case." "On the contrary," Poirot murmured, reaching carefully toward the inner pocket of the coat. From it he withdrew a crumpled scrap of paper, folded twice. He handed it delicately to Japp, who unfolded it beneath the lantern's glow. The paper bore but a few words, scrawled hastily in dark ink. "Meet me before midnight." No name, no signature. Only those ominous words. Japp whistled through his teeth. "Well, that's plain enough. He came here expecting someone. Somebody he trusted, maybe. Somebody who meant him harm." "Just so," Poirot said softly. "Yet note the ink, still sharp and unblotted. This was written in haste, not with care. And look, Hastings, do you see the mark upon the cuff of his sleeve? The same ink. He must have written this note himself, perhaps as reminder, perhaps as appointment. But where was it written? With whom intended?" Hastings frowned. "Then the note isn't from the killer, it's from him." "Precisely," Poirot replied. "The handwriting matches his stains. And so, we may conclude, he was not summoned. He summoned himself. He made arrangement to meet another." Japp scratched his chin. "Doesn't help us much, does it? If the fellow didn't see fit to jot down a name, we've no idea who he was waiting for." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, but it is the little omissions that reveal the most. He did not need to write the name, for he knew it very well. It was someone he trusted enough not to require reminder." Hastings shivered. Trusted, and yet it was that very someone who killed him. Exactment. Poirot rose to his full height, smoothing the lapel of his immaculate coat. "But we must not run ahead. First, we must identify the poor gentleman." The body was searched more carefully now, though with Poirot watching every motion like a schoolmaster overseeing pupils. No wallet, no letter, no card case indeed, but there was a pen of silver, engraved with delicate patterning. Poirot examined it closely. "English make," he murmured. "But not bought in any common shop. A gift, perhaps. Or a tool of profession." Japp took it, frowning. "We'll trace it. Shop records might tell us who purchased such a thing." Might. The dead man's watch was next, a gold piece, handsome but modest, its glass cracked from the fall. Japp lifted it, then started. "Stopped at 11:12, he said. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Curious, is it not? A watch ceases either from the blow that breaks it, or by the hand that wills us to believe in such a time. Which is it here, I wonder?" "Don't start all that already," Japp said. 11:12's good enough for me. He died round then." "Perhaps," Poirot replied softly, "and perhaps not." As the body was at last prepared for removal, Hastings cast a glance back down the narrow lane. The mist had thinned somewhat, and beyond the crowd of onlookers the gas lamps of the main road shone hazy but golden, like another world altogether. This hidden place, he thought, seemed cut off from London itself, an alley of secrets, a pocket of silence where murder could unfold unseen. Poirot joined him, his cane tapping lightly as he walked. His eyes were bright, though his manner was subdued. "It is an ugly thing, Hastings," he said, "but uglier still is the reason behind it. Come, let us not delay. This man, he has no name tonight. But I tell you, within days he shall speak to us, not with his voice, but with the small traces he has left behind." And then, he raised a finger, tapping it neatly against his temple. "Then, the little grey cells will make him live again." And with that, Hercule Poirot stepped from the shadows of the alley into the watchful glow of the lamps, leaving behind the crumpled form of the unknown man, yet already, in his mind, shaping the outlines of a mystery that promised to be as dark and twisted as the lane itself. Chapter 3. The Neighbours Speak. The following morning dawned grey, the fog of the previous night lingering in ragged patches over the Thames and creeping into the narrow streets near Holborn. Hastings, nursing his tea at the small breakfast table of their hotel, still felt the weight of the scene they had witnessed. The image of the crumpled body haunted him, the dark pool spreading across the stones. Poirot, however, was entirely composed. He sat opposite, resplendent in a perfectly pressed grey suit, his moustache gleaming as though polished anew. He buttered a brioche with delicate precision, then sprinkled it with the exact measure of sugar. "You look disgustingly cheerful this morning, Poirot," Hastings remarked. "After what we saw, I can hardly eat." "Ah, mon ami," Poirot replied, "it is not cheerfulness, but serenity. Already I perceive the path we must tread. There is comfort in order, even amid death. Come, we must take our nourishment. A detective who starves his body also starves his little grey cells." Within the hour they were once more at the alley, accompanied by Inspector Japp. The body had been removed during the night, the stones scrubbed of their dark stain, but the place retained an air of menace. A cat prowled the wall, its green eyes unblinking, as though resentful of the intrusion. Right then, Japp said briskly, "We've made inquiries. The fellow's name was Dr. Leonard Bracknell, a scholar of some sort. Lived modestly in Bloomsbury. Now let's see what the neighbours here have to say. If anyone saw or heard anything last night, they'll be around this lane." Poirot inclined his head. "Just so. Let us begin." They entered a cramped little shop at the mouth of the alley, its windows crowded with second-hand books. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles perched precariously upon his nose, looked up nervously as the trio entered. "You are Mr. Howard, I believe?" Japp asked. The man nodded, wringing his hands upon a cloth already threadbare. "Yes, Inspector. Terrible business, this. I heard something last night, though I could not say what. Tell us exactly, Poirot prompted gently. Mr. Howard licked his lips. It was just after 11, I think. I'd been closing up the shop, putting away the accounts. I heard footsteps running down the alley. Then, a sort of muffled cry. Short, sharp. I thought perhaps it was a drunkard. This area, you know, he trailed off, clearly uneasy. Poirot's eyes twinkled. And yet you did not look out of your door. The man flushed. I was afraid, sir. One hears of cutthroats. I did not want trouble. Merci, Poirot said softly. You have told us what you remember. Even the fear, that is useful. Next, they climbed a steep staircase to a window overlooking the alley. A seamstress, pale and brisk, received them amidst a clutter of fabric and thread. She introduced herself as Miss Pritchard. I did see something, she declared firmly. I had been working late, sewing by lamplight. Around 11, I looked out for air, and I saw a tall man slipping away down the alley. His coat was dark, and he wore a hat pulled low. He moved quickly, as though not wishing to be noticed. A tall man. Japp repeated. Did you see his face? No, Inspector. But he had a peculiar gait, as if favouring one leg. I thought at the time it was odd. Poirot inclined his head. Very good, mademoiselle. You have the eyes that notice. And you saw only this one figure. Yes, she said with certainty. Finally, they were ushered into the parlour of an elderly woman, Mrs. Redfern, who lived above a tobacconist's shop. Her sharp eyes missed little, though her hearing, she admitted, was not what it once had been. I don't care what anyone else says, she announced firmly, leaning upon her stick. I saw a woman. Young, no more than 30. She stood near the alley for some minutes, as though waiting. She wore a light coat, not dark, and I'd swear she glanced at her watch. Then, just before 11, she disappeared into the shadows. I saw no man, only her. Are you quite certain? Poirot asked, his tone gentle. As certain as I am that I'm talking to you now, Mrs. Redfern retorted. Men may tell you tales, but women, I think, can see other women clearly. Poirot smiled faintly. Indeed, madam. I thank you. As they left the tobacconist's stairs, Hastings shook his head in bewilderment. Well, this is hopeless. 3 witnesses, and each tells a different story. One heard footsteps and a cry. Another saw a tall man hurrying away. The last swears she saw a young woman loitering. How can they all be correct? Or how can they all be mistaken? Poirot murmured. His eyes were bright, though his tone remained tranquil. Never despise contradictions, Hastings. They are often the very road to truth. People see not with their eyes, but with their minds, their fears, their prejudices. Each may have seen a part of reality, or coloured it with imagination. Japp scowled. What I know is, we've got a dead scholar in a dark alley and no clear lead on who met him there. What do you make of it, Poirot? Poirot paused, smoothing his moustache thoughtfully. It tells me, Inspector, that our victim was not struck down by chance. He came to this place by appointment, and at least 2 others came also. A man perhaps, tall and hurried. A woman, young and watchful. Which of these is the killer, or are both entangled? That we must discover. He gestured delicately toward the alley. But above all, remember, the witnesses contradict because the truth is subtle. Lies are always clumsy. It is for us to arrange these fragments into harmony. That afternoon, Poirot insisted upon a slow walk once more through the alley. He paused often, staring at the walls, the cobblestones, the windows above. Hastings grew restless. "I don't see what you're looking for, Poirot." "The police searched it thoroughly last night." Poirot smiled. "Ah, but they searched for things. I search for order. And order, Hastings, is never absent. Even in chaos, it waits to be discovered." He stooped suddenly, tapping his cane at a narrow crack between stones. Hastings bent to look but saw nothing save a scrap of paper, sodden with rain. Poirot retrieved it delicately. The writing was smudged, but 2 letters remained visible. Faux. Hastings frowned. What could that mean? "Perhaps nothing," Poirot said softly, tucking the fragment into his case. "And yet, perhaps everything." By evening, the alley was once more shrouded in mist, but in Poirot's mind, threads had begun to weave together. A man of learning, ink-stained and proud. A secret appointment. A cry, a hurried step, a watching woman. And now, a torn scrap bearing the ghost of a word. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is a puzzle most delicate, mon ami. And I fancy, before long, the little grey cells will show us which pieces truly belong together, and which are but false shadows." Hastings gave a low whistle. "Well, I only hope the truth isn't half as sinister as it feels. That alley, it seemed alive last night, like it wanted to swallow us whole." Poirot adjusted his gloves, his face grave. "And perhaps, Hastings, in a sense it did. For one man at least, it became a tomb. But for us, it must become the theatre of revelation." Chapter 4. A clue in the shadows. The following day was damp again, the kind of damp that seeps into one's bones and lingers no matter how briskly one walks. Hastings pulled his coat collar high as he followed Poirot down a narrow street off Gray's Inn Road. Ahead, the black iron gates of the city mortuary loomed, severe and unwelcoming. "I say, Poirot," Hastings muttered, "I never enjoy these visits. Morgues are the most dreadful places. All that silence, and the smell." Poirot lifted a hand, immaculate as always in his gloves and shining shoes. "Courage, mon ami. Death is not to be feared. It is only a fact, like rain or fog. What matters is what the dead leave behind. And that, Hastings, is never nothing." Inside, the air was chill, heavy with disinfectant. A clerk led them to a stone chamber where the body of Dr. Leonard Bracknell rested upon a slab, covered with a plain sheet. The gaslight above hissed faintly, casting a sickly glow across the white tiles. Inspector Japp was already there, hands in pockets, his coat slung carelessly over a chair. "About time, Poirot. Thought you'd given this fellow up for lost." "Never that," Poirot said smoothly. "But haste is the enemy of precision. And in matters of death, we must be precise." The attendant drew back the sheet. Hastings turned away at once, fighting down the unpleasant tightness in his throat. Poirot, by contrast, stepped closer, tilting his head to regard the scholar's pale face. His eyes, sharp and observant, travelled with measured slowness from crown to toe. "Look here," Japp said, pointing to the wound at the back of the head. "Blunt instrument. Could have been a stick, a pipe, anything with weight. Quick blow, no chance for him to cry out. Death would have been near instant." Poirot's hand hovered just above the wound, never touching. "Yes. Neat, effective. Not the work of passion, but of design. You agree, Inspector?" Japp grunted. "Looks that way. But it doesn't get us closer to who swung it. Patience, mon ami. The body, it is a book. Let us read carefully." Poirot adjusted his stance, examining the scholar's right hand. He gestured delicately for Hastings to come nearer. "You recall, Hastings, last night I remarked upon the ink stains. See how they remain upon the fingers, old, layered, as though he wrote often. But also, look closer. Upon the cuff of his shirt. Hastings bent reluctantly, peering at the white fabric near the wrist. Sure enough, a faint smudge of dark ink marred the edge, half hidden in the fold. What of it? Hastings asked. It is the same ink, Hastings, the same shade as the note we discovered. He wrote it himself, and carelessly brushed against his sleeve. The note was no forgery. That is of importance. Japp scratched his chin. So, he penned a meeting arrangement himself. That makes it trickier. Whoever he was to meet, he trusted them enough to arrange it personally. Exactment, Poirot murmured. His gaze shifted now to the scholar's waistcoat. He pointed to the watch chain, still intact. The gold watch itself had been set aside, lying upon a tray with other small effects. Poirot lifted it with great delicacy. Observe, my friends. The glass is cracked, the hands fixed. It has stopped at precisely 11:12. Yes, we saw that last night, Hastings said. Poirot held it aloft in the dim light. But consider, mon ami. Watches do not always stop at the exact moment of calamity. Sometimes they are broken deliberately. A murderer, wishing to suggest the time of death, may contrive it. The question is, was this accident, or was it design? Japp frowned. What reason would anyone have to fiddle with the time? To give themselves an alibi, perhaps, Poirot said softly. If they could show they were elsewhere at 11:12, when in fact the crime occurred later. Or earlier. Lies often hide in such small artifices. Hastings gave a low whistle. So the watch may be lying. Or it may be truthful, Poirot replied serenely. The difficulty is to decide which. Poirot now studied the scholar's shoes, one scuffed at the toe. He lifted it gently, noting the fresh mark. Here also we have a small clue. This scuff is not old. It was made upon stone or brick, perhaps when he stumbled, perhaps in struggle. It tells us he moved in haste, and that, I think, was just before he died. Could be nothing, Japp said with a shrug. Or everything, Poirot countered. His tone was not sharp, only calm, as though explaining a law of nature. It is in the little details, the things too small for others to trouble with, that truth hides. The attendant presented a small tray of the dead man's possessions, the silver pen, the broken watch, a handful of coins, and a handkerchief neatly initialed L.B. No wallet? Hastings asked. No wallet, Japp confirmed grimly. Either he carried none, or it was taken. Yet money's here. That puzzles me. It should puzzle you, Poirot said. For if robbery was not the motive, what then remains? It is the mind of the scholar himself we must examine. What secret did he uncover? What truth did he threaten to reveal? That is why he was silenced. As they prepared to leave, Poirot lingered by the body a final moment. His expression, grave but composed, carried no revulsion, only respect. Adieu, Monsieur le Docteur, he murmured in French. You have left us little, yet enough. Your hand, your watch, your cuff, they whisper. An Hercule Poirot, he will not fail to listen. Outside once more, the air was damp but fresh compared to the heavy silence of the morgue. Hastings exhaled deeply, as though he had been holding his breath all along. I don't see that we are much further along, he said. A scuffed shoe, a broken watch, a spot of ink, hardly enough to hang a man on. Poirot smiled faintly, adjusting his gloves. Non, mon ami. Not enough to hang a man, but enough to set the little grey cells dancing. You must learn to regard details as threads. Alone, they are thin, almost invisible. But when woven together, they make a fabric strong enough to bind the truth. Japp lit a cigarette, squinting through the smoke. Well, I hope you're right. Because so far, all I see is a dead scholar and a lot of guessing. Poirot raised one eyebrow, his moustache twitching with amusement. It is not guessing, Inspector. It is method. And soon, I promise you, it will lead us to revelation. The shadows still hide much, but already a faint outline emerges. Hastings, though still uneasy, could not deny the quiet confidence in Poirot's voice. And deep down, he knew, as he always did, that those small details, so easily dismissed, would indeed prove the path to truth. Chapter 5. The Suspects Emerge. By the afternoon, Poirot had begun to sketch the outlines of Dr. Leonard Bracknell's life. Through inquiries at his lodgings and the university where he occasionally lectured, they learned he was a man of quiet habits, respected for his scholarship in rare manuscripts but not widely loved. His life, outwardly, seemed sedate. Yet beneath that calm, Poirot suspected undercurrents of discord. Always it is so, Poirot told Hastings as they walked towards the university library. The victim, he appears harmless, a man of letters. But words, they can wound more deeply than swords. And Dr. Bracknell, I think, wielded his pen without mercy. The librarian directed them to a small reading room, where Mr. Henry Collier awaited them. The rival scholar. Collier was a tall man, with angular features and a thin mouth pressed tightly together. His hands, long and bony, twitched upon the table as they entered. He stood abruptly, bowing slightly, though his manner was stiff. "I suppose you've come about poor Bracknell," he said. "Shocking business. Though, if you ask me, he brought much of his misfortune upon himself." Poirot regarded him keenly. "Comment, monsieur? You mean he had enemies?" Collier gave a sharp laugh. "Enemies?" "He collected them as others collect stamps." Bracknell delighted in humiliation. If he could refute your theory, he did so in public, with relish. He dismissed my own paper on medieval charters as a pedantic nonsense fit only for kindling. Before an entire lecture hall. It ruined months of work. Hastings frowned. "You disliked him, then?" "Disliked?" Collier's voice trembled with suppressed anger. "I hated him. Everyone knew it. But don't mistake me, I'm not fool enough to strike him down in an alley. Whatever I felt, I am a scholar, not a criminal." Poirot tapped his fingertips together. "Hatred, monsieur, is a dangerous companion. Sometimes it tempts even the scholar to lay aside his pen for something more heavy." Collier's eyes flickered, but he said nothing more. As they left, Hastings muttered, "Well, there's motive enough if ever I heard it. Humiliation breeds resentment." Poirot only smiled faintly. But hatred alone rarely kills. It must be mixed with necessity. Remember that, mon ami." The dismissed secretary. Their next call was at a modest flat in Bloomsbury, where Evelyn Marsh received them with evident agitation. She was a young woman of perhaps 28, with neat brown hair and intelligent grey eyes that flickered nervously as she spoke. "You want to talk about Dr. Bracknell?" she asked quickly, twisting a handkerchief between her fingers. "I worked for him, yes, until a month ago. He dismissed me." "On what grounds?" Japp, who had joined them again, asked brusquely. Miss Marsh hesitated, then said, "He claimed I had misplaced a valuable letter. A letter concerning a manuscript he had been studying. But it wasn't true, I never lost it. He accused me unjustly. I begged him to reconsider, but he would not. He said I was careless, unfit. That I had betrayed his trust." Her voice shook with remembered indignation. "Did you bear him resentment, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked gently. Her eyes filled with tears. "Of course I resented him. He ruined my livelihood. Do you know how difficult it is for a woman to find respectable employment in scholarship? I devoted myself to his work. And in return, he cast me aside. Hastings looked uncomfortable. I say, that's dashed unfair of him. Poirot's gaze remained fixed upon her. Tell me, mademoiselle, on the night of his death, where were you? Her face paled. At home. Alone. I went to bed early. There is no one to confirm it. Japp's pencil scratched across his notebook. That's not much of an alibi, Miss Marsh. She lifted her chin with sudden defiance. No, Inspector. But I did not kill him. Whatever my feelings, I am no murderer. Poirot inclined his head, studying her closely. When they departed, Hastings whispered, "She's lying, Poirot. I'd stake my life on it." The way she twisted that handkerchief, pure guilt. Poirot's moustache twitched. Or merely fear, Hastings. Fear of being accused, which is not the same as guilt. You must learn to distinguish the two. The angered collector. Their final visit that day was to the offices of Mr. Alfred Green, a wealthy collector of rare manuscripts. His rooms were lavishly furnished, with heavy drapes and the scent of cigar smoke clinging to the air. Green himself was a stout man with ruddy cheeks and a booming voice that filled the chamber. "So Bracknell's dead, eh?" he barked as they were shown in. "Well, I'm not surprised. He meddled too much in matters that were none of his concern." Poirot raised his brows. "You speak with feeling, monsieur. Did you quarrel with him?" "Quarrel?" Green snorted. "The man insulted me. I brought him a manuscript, a 15th century psalter, beautifully illuminated. I asked for his authentication. Do you know what he said? He called it some miserable forgery fit to deceive schoolboys. He dismissed me out of hand, refused even to examine it properly. Do you know what that cost me? Thousands of pounds. My reputation among collectors. He made me a laughingstock. And you were angry." Poirot prompted. "Angry? I could have throttled him." Green thundered. Then he caught himself, lowering his voice. "But of course, I didn't. I'm a businessman, not a cutthroat. Still, if you're looking for motives, he gave me plenty." Japp eyed him narrowly. "Where were you last night, Mr. Green?" "At my club until past midnight." "You'll find no shortage of men to vouch for me." Poirot inclined his head politely. "Indeed, we shall inquire." As they left the opulent office, Hastings shook his head. Another who could have done it. He was furious, any fool could see that. "OUI," Poirot said softly. "But anger, like hatred, is not always enough. It must be married to opportunity. The puzzle grows." That evening, Poirot sat in his armchair at the hotel, fingertips together, eyes half closed. Hastings paced restlessly. "Well, Poirot," he said at last, "3 suspects, 3 strong motives. Which of them is it?" Poirot opened his eyes, calm and reflective. "That, mon ami, is precisely the difficulty. Each has reason, each has grievance. But motive alone is never sufficient. We must also consider means and psychology. The scholar humiliated, the secretary dismissed, the collector scorned. Which of these, do you think, would lure a man to a dark alley and strike him down?" Hastings frowned. "All of them, I'd say. They all seem capable." Poirot smiled faintly. "Then our task is formidable indeed. But remember, one truth will unite the fragments. Already, I sense the shape of it. But not yet, not yet." He rose, adjusting his immaculate cuffs. "Come, Hastings. Tomorrow we will return to Dr. Bracknell's study. There, I think, we shall find the clue that tells us which resentment ripened into murder." And with that, Poirot extinguished the lamp, leaving Hastings to brood upon their trio of suspects, each shadowed by anger, each burdened with motive, yet only one the true killer. Chapter 6: The Scholar's Secrets. The following morning broke with a pale, reluctant sun peering through the mist. Poirot, impeccable as ever in a grey suit and polished shoes, declared their next destination with his usual air of quiet certainty. "Today, mon ami, we visit the sanctum of the dead man, the study. It is there that Dr. Bracknell lived most truly, and it is there, I think, that we shall discover what called him to that dark alley. A man may deceive the world, Hastings, but his room, never." They took a hansom cab through the crowded streets until they reached a neat brick house in Bloomsbury where Bracknell had lodged. The landlady, a thin woman with a wary expression, showed them upstairs to a room at the back. "This was the doctor's study," she said, lowering her voice as though afraid of disturbing a ghost. "I've not touched a thing since the police came." Poirot inclined his head politely. "Très bien. That is wise. We will trouble you no further." The scholar's study. The room was small but overflowing with books. Tall shelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of tomes. Papers lay in neat stacks upon the desk, though the dust and ink stains suggested long hours of solitary labor. The air carried the faint, dry smell of parchment mixed with pipe smoke. Hastings wandered to the window, peering out over the rooftops. "Dashed gloomy place," he remarked. "Looks as though he never went out at all." "On the contrary," Poirot replied, running a gloved finger along the spines of the books, "it tells us he was a man devoted to his work. But note, Hastings, devotion may lead a man to truths others wish concealed. And truth, when dangerous, can be fatal." Poirot bent over the desk. He began to sift through the piles with delicate precision, lifting papers without disturbing their order. His eyes, bright and attentive, missed nothing. The torn letter. "Ah. Regardes, Hastings." Poirot held up a scrap of paper no larger than a playing card. It appeared to have been torn hastily from a larger sheet. The handwriting was firm, with dark strokes of ink. Hastings leaned closer. "Forgery beyond doubt. Must speak out, though consequences may be grave." His eyes widened. "Forgery? By Jove, Poirot, that ties directly to Mr. Green's Salter." Poirot tapped the fragment thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But note that we have no name, no date. Only this tantalizing phrase. We must not leap to conclusions." He slipped the fragment into an envelope, sealing it as though it were a treasure. "Still, it tells us something of immense importance. Dr. Bracknell was about to expose a forgery. And someone, perhaps, could not afford that exposure. The missing volume." Poirot now turned to the shelves. He surveyed them with the air of a general inspecting troops, his head cocked slightly to one side. "You observe, Hastings, that the books are arranged alphabetically by subject. Theology, manuscripts, medieval history, always the order is precise. And yet, what is this?" He pointed to a narrow gap between two heavy volumes. The dust on the shelf showed clearly the outline of a book that had once rested there. "Someone removed it recently," Hastings said eagerly. "Exactment. And they did so with knowledge, for they did not disturb the rest. Which volume is absent? That is what we must discover." Poirot stooped to examine a small card index kept beside the desk. After a few moments, he murmured, "Here we are. The missing book is Codices and Counterfeits, a study of medieval forgeries by Dr. Eltham. Most suggestive, NSCE par." Hastings gave a low whistle. If Bracknell was studying forgeries, and one of our suspects dealt in questionable manuscripts, that puts things in a new light. Poirot's eyes twinkled. It suggests a chain of reasoning, yes. But whether it is the true chain, or a false one, we shall see. A hidden note. On the writing desk lay a thick ledger of notes in Bracknell's meticulous hand. Poirot opened it carefully, scanning page after page of cramped annotations. Halfway through, he paused at a slip of paper pressed between the leaves. This note, hastily scrawled, read, "Meeting arranged. Will reveal truth tonight. Trust no one." Hastings let out an exclamation. That must refer to the night he was murdered. He was planning to reveal his discovery. And clearly, he trusted the wrong person. Poirot's gaze grew inward. Yes. And note the final phrase, trust no one. It suggests fear, perhaps suspicion. Bracknell knew his danger, yet went willingly to the meeting. Why? Because he believed the truth outweighed the risk. That, Hastings, is the scholar's folly, and his courage. The cigarette end. Hastings, meanwhile, had taken to poking about near the hearthrug. Hello, what's this? He picked up a short cigarette but from beneath the grate. Poirot came at once to examine it. Très intéressant. Dr. Bracknell, as we have seen, smoked only a pipe. He would not have left this. Therefore, it belongs to a visitor. Collier smokes cigarettes. Hastings recalled suddenly. I noticed his fingers were stained yesterday. Poirot raised one brow. So, perhaps, does Mr. Green at his club. Or Miss Marsh, in secret. We must not confine possibilities too soon. Yet, it is a clue, Hastings, a small whisper of presence in this room. We must add it to our growing chain. The landlady's remark. As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused to speak once more with the landlady. Tell me, madam, did Dr. Bracknell receive visitors often? She pursed her lips. Not many. Once in a while, that tall, gloomy gentleman, Mr. Collier, came. And there was the young lady, Miss Marsh, before she was dismissed. Oh, and a stout man with a red face, can't say I liked him. Loud voice, always demanding Bracknell look at some paper or other. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Merci, madam. You have been most helpful. Poirot reflects. That evening, Poirot sat once more in his armchair, the firelight flickering across his thoughtful face. Hastings perched opposite, brimming with impatience. Well, Poirot, we've got it now. Bracknell was onto a forgery, Green Salter, most likely. Green had both the motive and the temper. He could easily have lured Bracknell out and struck him down. Poirot folded his hands serenely. It is possible, yes. But consider, Hastings, the missing book, the torn letter, the cigarette end. They tell us that more than one person had reason to fear Bracknell's revelations. Green, certainly. But also Collier, whose scholarship might be undermined, and Miss Marsh, who may have been accused of misplacing documents she dared not lose. Each has something to conceal. Hastings groaned. You always make it more complicated, Poirot. I prefer a straight line, motive, means, opportunity. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, mon ami, but life is not a straight line. It is a labyrinth. An Hercule Poirot, he must walk each winding path until he finds the center. There lies the truth. He leaned back, eyes half closed, as though seeing patterns invisible to Hastings. The torn letter, the missing volume, the fearful note, all pieces of a puzzle. The study of Dr. Bracknell has spoken, Poirot murmured softly. Now, it remains for us to interpret its language. Soon, Hastings, very soon, the shadows will yield their secret. Chapter 7, The Web Tightens. The next afternoon found Hastings restless. He paced their hotel room like a caged animal while Poirot, infuriatingly serene, polished his moustaches before the mirror. "I don't see why we're waiting about," Hastings grumbled. "We've enough evidence to put Green in the dock already. The forgery note, the missing book, his quarrel, what more do you need?" Poirot turned from the mirror, eyebrows raised. "Mon ami, you are eager to hang a man upon shadows. But Hercule Poirot, he requires light. Always, before the trap is sprung, I must be sure the bird is within." And with that, he announced they were to meet the three principal suspects together under the guise of clarifying Bracknell's research. The gathering. The appointed room was a chamber in the university library, lofty and echoing, its shelves looming like silent judges. One by one, the suspects arrived, Collier stiff and sour-faced, Miss Marsh pale but composed, Mr. Green ruddy and scowling, his watch chain jingling as he shifted impatiently. Inspector Japp, gruff as ever, stood at the back, arms folded. Poirot, immaculate in a dark suit, stepped to the center. His manner was genial, almost disarming. "Mesdames et messieurs, I thank you for coming. You ask why you are gathered here? It is because you share a connection with Dr. Leonard Bracknell. His death was not a random blow struck by a thief. It was murder, most carefully planned. And in this very room, I think, the threads will show themselves." Green gave a snort. "Fine words, Poirot. But unless you've got proof, you're wasting my time." Poirot only inclined his head. "Patience, monsieur. Proof, it comes from small things, gestures, words, contradictions. Already, each of you has told me something most revealing. The first test, the watch." Poirot withdrew Bracknell's cracked watch from his pocket and laid it upon the table. "This watch, you know, was found upon the body. It had stopped at 11:12. Tell me, what do you make of it?" Collier leaned forward, his thin lips curling. "Obviously it shows the time of death. The murderer struck him then." Miss Marsh shook her head. "Not necessarily. A watch can break at any moment, it proves nothing." Green folded his arms. "Time of death or not, what difference does it make? You've got the body, haven't you?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah. But you see, only one of you has spoken with true caution. Mademoiselle Marsh, you said the not necessarily. That is the voice of reason. The guilty, they often leap to certainty. Why? Because they wish us to believe their version of events." Collier flushed, opening his mouth to retort, then shut it again. Hastings, watching, felt a little thrill. Poirot had sown the first seed of doubt. The second test, the cigarette. Poirot now produced the cigarette end Hastings had discovered in Bracknell's study. This, too, is a small thing. Dr. Bracknell smoked only a pipe. Yet this was found in his grate. Which of you will claim it? Green sniffed. "Not mine. I smoke cigars." Miss Marsh colored faintly. "I sometimes smoke, when nervous. But never in Dr. Bracknell's study." Collier hesitated, then said, "Yes, I smoke cigarettes. Turkish blend. And yes, I visited him last week. Perhaps I left it then." Poirot bent his head, as though in agreement. "Perhaps, monsieur. But tell me, why did you not mention this visit before?" Collier stiffened. "Because it was trivial. I called to discuss a manuscript, that was all." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "And yet you omitted it. Curious, is it not? Such omissions often speak louder than confessions." The third test, the torn letter. Finally, Poirot placed the torn fragment upon the table. "Forgery beyond doubt. Must speak out, though consequences may be grave." These were Dr. Bracknell's last written words. He intended to expose a falsehood. Which of you feared such exposure most? Green's face darkened. If you mean me, that's a lie. My Salter is genuine, I'd stake my reputation. Bracknell was a fool, blinded by jealousy of my collection. Collier sneered. If anyone forged manuscripts, it was the dealers you consort with, Green. Not men of letters such as I. Miss Marsh clasped her hands tightly. I know nothing of forgeries. Only that Dr. Bracknell dismissed me for misplacing a letter. Perhaps that letter concerned this very matter. Her voice trembled, yet her words rang with a painful honesty. Poirot studied them in silence. The tension in the room was palpable. Each suspect, he knew, stood upon a precipice. A single misstep would betray them. Poirot's reflection. At last, Poirot spoke softly, almost kindly. You see, Miss Amos, how the net draws in. The forgery, the missing book, the false time of death, these are not scattered fragments. They are pieces of a pattern. And one among you knows the whole design. Green slammed a fist on the table. If you're accusing me, say it outright. Poirot shook his head. Non, monsieur. Not yet. I accuse no one, yet. But soon I shall place before you the truth entire. For the moment, I only observe. The guilty cannot help but reveal themselves when pressed. And already, the little grey cells whisper to me. The tension mounts. As the meeting broke up, Hastings walked beside Poirot down the echoing corridor. Well, that was dashed dramatic, Hastings said. But what did you learn, really? They all seemed equally suspicious. Poirot's moustaches twitched. My's OUI, Hastings. Suspicion is abundant. But truth, it is rare. Did you not note the differences? Collier, eager to fix the time of death. Green, desperate to shift blame upon others. Mademoiselle Marsh, she shows fear, but also courage. Each gesture, each word, they are like brushstrokes. Soon, the whole picture will be visible. Hastings shook his head. If you say so. I'd as soon arrest the lot of them and be done with it. Poirot chuckled softly. That is why you are the man of action, mon ami, and I am the man of reflection. But take heart, the truth is close. Tomorrow, I will gather them again, and then. He lifted a finger, his eyes gleaming. Then, Hastings, the curtain will rise, and all shall be revealed. A night of restless thoughts. That night, Hastings found sleep elusive. He lay awake, replaying the scene in the library chamber. Collier's flushed anger, Green's booming denials, Miss Marsh's trembling honesty, it all circled in his mind. Each seemed guilty, each seemed innocent, all at once. At last, he drifted into uneasy dreams of dark alleys, cracked watches, and books that vanished from their shelves. Across the corridor, however, Hercule Poirot sat serenely at his desk, penning notes in his neat hand. To him, the case was already taking form. The lies, the omissions, the contradictions, they had all spoken. The murderer had revealed themselves, though none but Poirot yet knew it. He closed his notebook, satisfied. Tomorrow, he whispered in the quiet room, the denouement. And justice, it will be served. Chapter 8, The Truth Revealed. The next afternoon, under a pale autumn sun, Poirot summoned the three suspects once more to the same library chamber where they had met the day before. Japp was there too, grim and alert, while Hastings stood loyally at Poirot's side, impatient to hear the truth at last. Collier entered first, his mouth set in a hard line. Miss Marsh followed, pale and nervous, clutching her gloves tightly. Green arrived last, blustering and red-faced, muttering about theatrical nonsense. Poirot, immaculate in black, bowed to them all with courtly grace. Mesdames et messieurs, thank you for coming. You must wonder why I trouble you again. It is because the moment has come. The little grey cells, they have worked, and now the picture is complete. I shall lay before you the truth of Dr. Leonard Bracknell's death. The method of murder. Poirot stepped to the centre of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. First, the manner of the crime. Dr. Bracknell was struck from behind with a blunt instrument. Quick, efficient. His watch, found broken, pointed to 11:12. Yet this was false. The watch was broken deliberately after the murder to suggest a false time of death. Why? So that the killer might be elsewhere when suspicion fell. Collier stirred uneasily. Green scowled. Miss Marsh clasped her gloves tighter still. The forgery. Poirot lifted the torn fragment of letter and held it delicately. Second, the motive. Dr. Bracknell had uncovered a forgery. He wrote, "Forgery beyond doubt. Must speak out, though consequences may be grave." What forgery was this? A medieval manuscript. The missing book from his shelves, codices and counterfeits, proved that forgery was his chief concern. The man who had most to fear from such exposure was, you may think, Mr. Alfred Green. Green's face darkened. It's a lie. My Psalter is genuine. Calm yourself, Monsieur, Poirot said softly. Your manuscript may be genuine, or it may not. That is irrelevant. What matters is that Dr. Bracknell's death was not about your collection. None. He had stumbled upon another forgery, closer to home, more dangerous to a reputation than any Psalter in your possession. The secretary's secret. Poirot now turned to Evelyn Marsh. His voice softened. Mademoiselle, you were dismissed, accused of misplacing a letter. In truth, that letter did not vanish by accident. It was taken from Bracknell's desk by another hand, anxious that its contents should not come to light. You suffered unjustly. For that, I offer you my sympathy. But you are not a murderer. Your fear is of disgrace, not of justice. A tear slipped down her cheek. She whispered, "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot." The collector's fury. Poirot faced Green. Monsieur, you were furious at Bracknell, yes. You threatened him, perhaps even wished him dead. But your alibi is sound, your club companion saw you until past midnight. The timing makes it impossible for you to have lured Bracknell to that alley. Your bluster conceals only pride, not guilt. Green exhaled heavily, relief and anger mingling. So I'm cleared, am I? I told you so. The scholar unmasked. At last, Poirot turned to Henry Collier. His eyes, calm and penetrating, fixed upon the rival scholar. Monsieur Collier, it is you who tremble now. Let us consider. You hated Bracknell, for he mocked your work before all. But hatred alone, no. What more? Ah, but there was something greater at stake, your reputation itself. For Bracknell had discovered that your recent paper, your crowning achievement, was based upon forged charters. Forgeries you had presented as authentic. He was preparing to expose you. That is why you silenced him. Collier's face went ashen. He half rose, then sank back again. You can't prove that, he whispered hoarsely. Poirot's finger wagged gently. I can. The missing book on forgeries, taken from Bracknell's shelf, was found hidden in your rooms this morning, thanks to the diligence of Inspector Japp. You removed it to destroy evidence that he was investigating your fraud. And the cigarette end in Bracknell's grate, your brand, Monsieur. You visited him, quarrelled with him, left it behind. All small things, but together they form the chain. The final link, the watch. Only you, knowing Bracknell's habits, could break it at 11:12 to give yourself the illusion of an alibi. The final proof. Poirot's voice rose, clear and commanding. You lured Bracknell to the alley on the pretext of reconciliation, or of sharing a discovery. You struck him swiftly, then broke the watch to mislead us. But you overlooked the ink upon his cuff, the ink he spilled writing his last note after your quarrel. It proved he wrote that note himself, and after your visit, when he already suspected you. He wrote, "Trust no one." But alas, it was too late. There was silence. Then Collier sprang to his feet, his mask of composure shattering. "Yes," he cried bitterly. "Yes, I killed him. He would have ruined me, exposed me before all the world. Do you know what it means to a scholar to be branded a fraud? Better death, his, not mine." His shoulders sagged, and the fight went out of him. Japp stepped forward grimly, placing a heavy hand on his arm. "That's enough, Mr. Collier. You'll have the rest of your say in court." Aftermath. As Collier was led away, Hastings released a long breath. "By Jove, Poirot, you did it again. I was sure it was Green, and for a while I even suspected Miss Marsh. But you saw straight through to Collier." Poirot smiled modestly, smoothing his moustaches. "It was not magic, mon ami, only method. The watch, the book, the cigarette, the torn letter, all were small things. But together they sang a harmony. And always, it is in the harmony, not the single note, that truth resides." Miss Marsh approached hesitantly. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you my thanks. You have cleared my name. Without you, I fear I should have been accused." Poirot bowed over her hand. "Mademoiselle, you owe me nothing. It is justice you must thank, and Dr. Bracknell himself, who left us the clues. He died bravely, pursuing truth. It is fitting that truth should avenge him." Poirot reflects. Later that evening, as Hastings and Poirot sat by the fire, Hastings mused aloud. "It's extraordinary, Poirot. A man killed not for money, not for love, but for scholarship, for pride." Poirot nodded gravely. "Yes, Hastings. Pride is a deadly poison. To be exposed as a fraud, for Collier, was worse than death. In such a case, murder becomes, how shall I say, the desperate act of a man drowning." Hastings shook his head. "Well, I can't pity him. Bracknell was an awkward sort, perhaps, but he didn't deserve to die for telling the truth." Poirot's gaze softened. "No one deserves such an end. And yet, it is always the same, truth and lies, pride and fear. That is the eternal battle. Hercule Poirot, he is but the referee." He sipped his tisane, content. "And so, my friend, another case is closed. The little grey cells, they have triumphed once more." Hastings smiled. "I don't know how you do it, Poirot. But I wouldn't miss being here to see it for the world." Poirot twirled his moustaches, his eyes twinkling. "Nor would I, mon ami. Nor would I." And with that, the fire crackled warmly, casting long shadows across the room, the shadows of mysteries solved, and of new ones yet to come.